The sun was blazing over my new property, dust rising from the freshly dug garden beds. I was mid-renovation when I saw them, the HOA board storming down the street, clips of papers in hand, faces red with authority. Behind them, a marked patrol car screeched to a stop, deputies jumping out, hands on radios. One board member yelled, "You're under our HOA rules. You'll follow them, or we call the cops." I held up my deeds calmly, letting the morning light glint off the stack of notarized papers. "I'm not under your HOA." The deputies froze, confused. "Sir, what do you mean?" I smiled faintly, voice steady, letting the tension hang in the air. "I didn't just buy one house. I own the entire block, every lot, every street, all of it. You're standing on my property." The board's smug confidence evaporated, their faces drained of color. Their arrogance had just walked into a wall of truth, and the cops around them were about to witness it all. The morning sun painted the streets golden as I finished tightening the last hinge on my front door. My new property was finally coming together: fresh paint, polished fences, and a garden that smelled of earth and ambition. I could almost hear the neighborhood settling into a quiet routine, unaware of the storm about to hit. Then it happened. Tires screeched down the block. Dust swirled around a cluster of black SUV, and a marked patrol car skidded to a halt in front of my driveway. Two deputies jumped out, hands hovering over their radios, alert and cautious. Following them were four members of the HOA board, faces red, clips of paper clutched like weapons. Karen, level arrogance radiated from their every move. "You're under our rules," the tallest one shouted. "You will comply with the HOA regulations immediately, or we will take action." I set my tools down slowly, wiping sweat from my forehead. Calmly, I stepped toward the gate, letting the bright daylight illuminate my confidence. "I'm not under your HOA." The deputies blinked, confused. "Sir, what do you mean?" The board members froze mid-step. One stammered, We sent the notices. You're part of the community. You can't just..." I held up my deeds, letting the sunlight catch the edges of the papers. "I didn't just buy one house. I bought the entire block. Every street, every lot, every home that you think you can control. You're standing on my property." A heavy silence fell. The wind rustled the leaves, the cattle in the distance lowed softly, and the neighborhood seemed to hold its breath. The board's faces went pale. Fear replaced arrogance, and even the deputies hesitated, unsure how to process what they were witnessing. Karen, level panic set in. You can't own all of this. This isn't legal." I walked closer, boots crunching on the gravel, every step deliberate. "Oh, it's legal, and by law, your authority here stops at the boundary of my deeds. Anything beyond that is trespassing, and by the looks of it, you're about to learn that the hard way." One of the deputies raised a hand, glancing at his partner. "Ma'am, sir, we need to verify this. We can't act without proof." I smiled faintly, "Then verify it. You'll see exactly whose authority matters here." The HOA board shuffled nervously, realizing that their whole plan to intimidate me had failed before it even began. They had expected compliance, fear, maybe even some excuses. Instead, they were met with truth, legality, and calm confidence. Karen, the de facto leader of the group, flailed her arms. You can't just flaunt your paperwork. HOA rules are binding." I shook my head slowly. "Not on this block, not on my property, not on any of it." The deputies flipped through my deeds, reading line by line. The board tried to argue, shouting, waving their clipboards, insisting that community regulations applied. But every word they said was met with a quiet, firm rebuttal backed by legal proof, my calm composure, and the glaring reality that I owned everything they thought they could control. By the end of the confrontation, it was clear who held the power. The HOA board's confidence had crumbled like dust in the wind, replaced by anger, confusion, and panic. They had called the cops to intimidate me, but in the end, the law and common sense sided with the rightful owner. I leaned against the porch railing, the deputies nodding respectfully as they finished their verification. Karen's glare could have burned holes in the wooden fence, but she had no ground left to stand on. The neighborhood had begun to gather, whispers of "Did he really buy the whole block?" and "Wow, she's in trouble," circulating quietly. I simply watched calm, letting the tension linger just long enough for everyone to understand the HOA thought they had authority here. They didn't, not 1 inch of it, and this was just the beginning. The morning light stretched across the block, making every leaf, fence, and rooftop glow with the illusion of peace. But the tension was electric. Karen and her board members were huddled in a tight cluster at the edge of the street, whispering furiously. Every now and then they glanced at me, standing tall on my porch, exuding calm authority. One of them muttered, "We can't just let him get away with this, he can't own all of it." Karen snapped her head around, her eyes wide, voice sharp. "We need to act fast, call the HOA lawyer now. I don't care if he's on vacation, he has to stop this before it spreads." I watched, hands tucked behind my back, boots kicking up dust on the porch floor. Their fear was visible now, raw and unfiltered, but I knew better than to show any hint of satisfaction. This was their panic, not mine. 2 deputies lingered at the edge of the driveway, awkwardly flipping through my deeds again, their expressions a mix of curiosity and disbelief. "Sir, just so we understand," one said cautiously, "you bought every property on this block, all of them." I nodded slowly. "Every last one, and I intend to manage this neighborhood exactly as I see fit. You are welcome to enjoy the streets, but authority, that ends where my deeds begin." Karen's face twisted into a snarl. "This isn't over. You think this ends here. You're going to regret this, mark my words. The HOA has rules and we will enforce them." I shook my head. "You tried intimidation. You tried authority. And now you see that those rules are meaningless when the law backs me completely." One board member stepped forward, brash and desperate. "We can't just ignore this. Maybe we can file some kind of injunction." I laughed softly, a sound that seemed to make the street itself hold its breath. "File what? On whose authority? The one you've already admitted has nothing over me." Karen's hands shook as she waved her arms, trying to regain control. "The police, call them. They'll enforce the HOA." The deputies exchanged uneasy glances. One cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we can't act against property that is legally owned by someone else. Your HOA authority doesn't override property law." The words hit Karen like a physical blow. She opened her mouth, but no argument came. Her color drained, and for a brief moment I saw her panic crystal clear, the arrogance, the control, the sense of invincibility gone. I stepped down from the porch slowly, boots crunching over the gravel, keeping my voice calm but firm. "Let's make this simple. You will leave my property, and you will refrain from any further attempts to assert control over it. That's your only option if you want to avoid further legal consequences." The board hesitated, their whispers growing frantic. We have to do something." "No," I said, voice rising just enough to cut through their muttering. "You have to stop for good. This isn't a negotiation. This is reality." For the next 10 minutes, the board tried everything, shouting, threatening, flailing their arms, but the deputies kept them in check, glancing at me for direction, unsure whether to intervene further. My calm presence and clear ownership of the block left them powerless. Neighbors began to gather quietly, peeking from behind fences, phones ready to record. Murmurs of disbelief spread. "He owns all the houses. I can't believe she called the cops. She looks terrified." Karen's face twisted in anger, frustration, and humiliation all at once. She realized too late that she had not just underestimated one homeowner, she had underestimated the person who owned everything she thought she could control. Finally, with her hands shaking, she backed away, muttering to her board members, "This isn't over. I'll find a way." I watched her leave the property, the deputies following close behind. Calm returned, but the tension lingered in the air like dust, a reminder to everyone on the street that arrogance and entitlement have consequences. I leaned against the fence again, letting the sunlight warm my face. The neighborhood had witnessed the showdown. Karen had tried to assert control, but reality and the law had backed me completely. And I knew one thing for certain: the final lesson wasn't given yet. That would come soon, in a way they would never forget. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the block, painting each house with warm golden light. But the calm was deceptive. Karen and her remaining board members huddled near the edge of the street, whispering furiously, panic evident in every gesture. Their earlier arrogance had completely evaporated. I stepped out onto my porch, boots crunching softly on the gravel, and surveyed the scene. Neighbors had begun to peek from behind fences and windows, smartphones in hand, murmuring to each other. The tension was palpable, the air thick with anticipation. Karen's voice cracked as she tried to regain control. "You can't just flaunt your deeds, This isn't how rules work. HOA rules are binding." I leaned against the railing, calm, letting the sunlight illuminate my confidence. "Karen, the only rules here that matter are the law and the deeds in my name. Everything else is optional." Her face paled. You can't do this. People will. I cut her off with a single, steady look. "People already understand. Everyone here knows exactly who has authority, and you overstepped." At that moment, the HOA supervisor arrived, summoned by my earlier call. He stepped out of his car, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning the chaos. Karen's knees trembled as she realized the magnitude of the situation. "Karen," the supervisor said sharply, voice carrying across the block, "your behavior today, the false reports, the harassment, the attempt to misuse HOA authority is unacceptable. Effective immediately, you are suspended pending termination." Karen's mouth opened in disbelief. What you can't." I shook my head slowly. "Oh, but they can, and they did, and now everyone is witnessing the consequences of arrogance unchecked." The deputies had relaxed now, standing near the curb, giving the HOA board space to process the situation. The neighbors had grown bolder, some whispering, some nodding approvingly. Phones captured the entire scene. Karen's humiliation broadcast in real time to anyone curious enough to look. Her clipboard slipped from her hands, clattering onto the pavement. The supervisor motioned to her, and she was escorted toward the parking lot, shaking with anger, fear, and disbelief. Each step she took away from the block seemed to shrink her authority further. I turned my gaze back to the neighborhood. People were slowly returning to their homes, conversations buzzing about the showdown they had just witnessed. "Did you see that?" one neighbor whispered. "She actually got fired, right here on the street." I smiled faintly, leaning back on the porch railing. Calm returned to the block, but the lesson lingered. Authority misused, arrogance unchecked. Entitlement assumed all of it could be dismantled by truth, law, and the patience to wait for the perfect moment. The afternoon shadows lengthened, golden light streaming over the fences, lawns, and rooftops. The dust from the morning had settled. My block was peaceful again. Karen would remember this day for the rest of her life. The HOA had tried to intimidate me, threaten me, and assert power over a man they assumed was just another homeowner. They failed spectacularly, and the neighborhood had seen it all. I walked slowly along the driveway, letting the sunlight warm my face, listening to the soft whispers of the wind through the trees. This ranch, these homes, this street all mine now, protected not just by legal papers, but by a clear demonstration of truth and authority. Justice had been served, karma had found its mark, and for the first time in months, the block felt truly at peace, the perfect balance restored. The residents would talk about this showdown for years. But one thing was certain. No HOA, no Karen, no entitled board would ever forget the day they tried to assert power over the wrong man. And I stood tall, watching the sun dip toward the horizon, knowing that some victories are not just about winning, they are about showing the world exactly who has the authority to protect what's theirs. The block was mine, the neighborhood safe, and the lesson had been delivered.